Hey everyone, I wanted to give you some feedback on your Module 3 review assignment. In general, you guys did really pretty good as a group, but there were a few consistent issues that I wanted to come back and cover with you to make sure you understand the concepts. In addition, I wanted to let you know that if you would like to earn some additional credit for this, you can do so by demonstrating mastery of the concepts, and I'll talk with you a little bit later about how you do that. So the first thing I wanted to point out is there was a really wide variance in the grades. The lowest grade was a 10 and the highest grade was a 40. So as a group, I think what I saw is that if you if you actually read the materials, you did better than if you did not read the materials. So I do want to say make sure you are reading in the text and you are reviewing the lectures. It's important. And to break that down a little bit further, you can see that 4 individuals got between a 90 and 100, which is, I think, a little bit low. And then 17 of you were between 80 and 89%, 20 between 70 and 79%, and then a very small number were dropping below that. So what did we look at on this test? The first question that we had is relating to quality assurance, and one of the things that quality assurance does is prevention of errors and detection of errors and correction of errors, not necessarily establishing the consequence. So I just wanted to make sure you understood those differences, that quality assurance is in there to make sure that we understand why things happen, how to correct them, and how to prevent them in the future. The next question, this was kind of interesting to me, was how do you identify the key variables? And most of you did realize that you could look at the protocol or protocol synopsis or the analysis plan. But there were a number of you, almost 40%, that felt you could also find the key variables in an SOP. So I want to make sure that you understand the difference between an SOP, which is a generic document talking about a process. That's what Standard Operating Procedure stands for. Versus a protocol or analysis plan, which are documents that are specific to a protocol. So if you want to identify the key variables for a protocol, a specific study that you're running, you go to the document specific to that document, not to the generic SOP that tells you how to conduct an activity. So that's the difference between a standard operating procedure, which applies across protocols or projects, versus something that is project specific. The next question we had was whether or not FDA guidance documents are legally binding and require compliance. And this is something that I think you guys struggle with a little bit, and you're not the only ones. In the industry, people struggle with it too. A regulation is legally binding and it requires compliance. So if something is in the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, that is a regulation and it is legally binding. And you have to comply with it or you are literally breaking the law. But a guidance document is different. A guidance document is the agency's documentation of what they think is the best practice and what they feel you should be doing, but you aren't required to do it. You might have a process that is more stringent. You might have a process that is less stringent, but as long as you are in compliance with the regulations, then that's all you need to do. So that you can think of the guidance documents as really recommendations rather than requirements. So make sure you understand this moving out in the industry. If it's a regulation, you have to do it. There's no discussion, no two ways around it. If it's a guidance document, then you need to consider it and figure out how the points in the guidance document relate to the program that you're running and what is the best way to move forward with that. Another thing that people get a little confused about is whether the FDA and the ICH dictate an acceptable error rate, and they don't. They absolutely don't. They basically say you have to have quality data, but they don't define what quality data is. They leave that to the sponsor or the CRO. Industry practice is, 0.20 errors. So there's a difference between what we in the industry say is the accepted error rate and understanding that we want to come to be in line with that versus having a regulation or requirement issued by a regulatory agency that dictates an error rate. So the FDA and ICH don't say what an acceptable error rate is. The next question here is what type of clinical data management system is optimized for entry of the data at the clinical site? And that's the electronic data capture system. Most of you realized it wasn't paper-based, and most of you understood that CDISC had nothing at all to do with clinical data management systems. But a couple of you had interactive voice response here, and I just wanted to point out that an IVRS system is not a clinical data management system per se. It is a supporting system that collects data, but when we think about a CDMS, we're really thinking about a system that manages all of the data involved in a trial. So the correct answer here is that an electronic data capture system is optimized for entry of data at the clinical site. The next question is, what is an example of demographic data? And most of you did a little bit better on this. There were still a few errors, but the correct answer was sex or gender. Sex, gender, date of birth, ethnicity, these are all considered demographic data. Pulse rate, adverse events, and reason for withdrawal are not. They are data that relate to specific assessments or events that occur in the study. Another question we had is, once a data management plan is created, it cannot be changed or revised, and the correct answer was true, which most of you got. Or, I'm sorry, the correct answer was false, which most of you got. Basically, the data management plan is supposed to be a living document, and as the study progresses, you need to update it to reflect the reality of what the project's expectations are. Sorry, got a little stuck here. And then for question number 8 for multiple choice here, which is the following example of good CRF design? Most of you did get the fact that you are only to require the data that you need for the analysis. It is very tempting to collect all the data you might need later, or to collect the same data using multiple questions to make sure that you can check them both and see if the answer is the same, or to encourage text visit or text describing a patient visit. But the reality is that when you are analyzing data, you have an obligation to really focus that data so it has less of a burden on the patient, and so that it is supporting the analysis. If you collect all the data you might need in case you need it later, that's generally not a good idea. You have to collect and clean that data. You're asking the site and the patient to generate it, and you might not ever touch it. And for the same thing here is, if you collect the same data using multiple questions, you also potentially run into a lot of issues because you're introducing more possibility for human error. So avoid collecting the same data thinking you're going to reconcile it. Collect it once, make sure your question is clear so you get good compliance, and move on. All right. Now, how do you get extra credit? I have set up a discussion board, and it says Module 3 Demonstrated Mastery, and if you would like to get additional credit, you can go in and post a brief sentence, and you can do multiple responses in one posting. You don't have to do multiple postings. Post a brief sentence describing the correct answer for each question that you missed. I'll give you a half credit, or 2.5 points for each correct answer, but you have to get this completed by midnight on September 20th. Please feel free to reach out to me, send me an email, and let me know if you have questions or need further clarifications on any of the things that we've discussed. Thank you.